Hey, all my IFG friends, this is Steve. I want to say, if you like movies like I do, we've started a new podcast called Happy Hour Flicks. You can find it anywhere podcasts are found. It's all about nostalgic movies that we love, and we bring on special guests each episode, and we also have specialty cocktails made for each one, too. So it really is an hour of a good time talking about movies that we love, like Gremlins, Seven, Free Willy. We talk about The Last Starfighter also. I mean, we kind of run the gamut across all the decades and really have a great time. So wanted to invite you to come over and join us. That's Happy Hour Flicks, anywhere podcasts are found.
This is the
Independent
Filmmaker's Guide
from Framework Productions.
Framework
Productions.
So, Noam, Psychosynthesis deals with a thriller sort of genre where the main character gets a heart transplant and starts to take on the characteristics of the donor. So what is it that you want people to take away from the film if they've watched it?
Well, I think ideally what I want people to take away is just the emotional impact of the film. It's really, obviously it's a narrative feature and there is a story that you're following, but it's really a mood film at its core. It's very much an art film. There's a lot of texture and sort of nuance to the way that we shot the film and scored the film. And I don't know, some of my favorite films I walk away from and I'm not always just left thinking about the plot, but I'll walk away kind of thinking about the emotion that maybe it stirred up or the feeling. And that's kind of, I think, what we were going for in this film. So I hope that when people watch it, they learn maybe a little bit about this condition that we've obviously exaggerated greatly. It's called cellular memory. And in real life, it's something that people experience when they get like a heart transplant or other organ transplants, and they kind of feel this connection to their donor. So we obviously want to explore that and kind of, shed some light on that in this fun way where we go into genre territory. But it's really more about just the experience, going on this sort of hopefully emotional ride with the characters and walking away feeling like maybe you've experienced a tone or a mood or, almost like when you're listening to a piece of music or something that just kind of sits with you after, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So how did you come about, and what was your background that made you want to move in to make films in the first place?
Well, I think I've always sort of wanted to make films and I've always really just made films for fun, dating back to just being a kid with, the parents, handy cam or whatever. Like many filmmakers, I think basically I just transitioned into filmmaking more full time, pretty organically. There was never really a moment where I sat down and said, I have to make movies or I have to do this or I have to, start a production company or any of the things that I ended up doing. It really just sort of happened organically because that's really just what I like doing. And as soon as I realized at a certain point that you could actually, make a living working on films, then I started looking for opportunities because when I was younger, I always just thought it would be a hobby. And then eventually when you realize that, you can make some sort of career out of it, because I didn't know anyone growing up that worked in, film or entertainment or anything. So I just didn't think it was possible. So I think that for me, that was probably like the biggest turning point in almost like taking it a little bit more seriously.
I read on your site, which by the way, I really appreciate your website. I think it's very cool. You have a great resource. It's all set up. It's noamkroll.com, right?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. And we're actually going to relaunch it. So I'm doing all the design stuff today. So probably by the time you post this, there will be a nice fresh design up there with a lot more resources and easier to find, a lot of the content that's up there. But really glad that you're enjoying it so far.
Yeah, no, I really liked digging through it. It was very thorough. I mean, you went through and you really brought a lot of information to the forefront about the process of making the movie and very honest about how it worked, because this is a micro budget feature. So you guys worked, it seemed like very, very like hand in hand, lots of people doing lots of things in a very short amount of time.
Exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much usually, I guess, the case on this scale budget. The total budget was roughly $25,000. We raised 15 or so on Seed and Spark. We did this crowdfunding campaign, and then I put in the other 10 just from some cash that I threw into the pot to kind of allow us to really not have to cut any corners in terms of locations, because obviously 15,000 is a very little amount. So is 25, but that extra chunk really sort of allowed us to bring on a couple more crew members and do a couple of things that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So yeah, you're totally right though. Everyone wore a lot of hats. Our crew in total was, I believe on most days, like 8 or 9 people. And we were essentially doing the work of a 20 or 30 person crew, which also is small by some people's standards. But yeah, we had to keep it really, really small. But we got it done, I guess, in the end, and definitely learned a lot along the way for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to check a couple of boxes here, just to make, so at that budget level, the crew's absolutely non-union, right?
Yeah, crew is 100% non-union.
Yeah, did you use a SAG and after actors, or do you go non-union for that as well?
No, we actually did go SAG for the actors. And that was partly because I also, like you guys, have a production company. We're signatory with SAG because we've done other SAG productions. My last feature before this was SAG, and then, other jobs as well. So I already sort of had gone through the ringer a little bit. I knew what to expect. They had a lot of my, info and everything on file already. So it wasn't really like starting from ground zero. The other thing was with SAG, especially, here in LA, a lot of so many actors are SAG, even actors that aren't super well established yet. So if you just want to increase the amount of talent that you have access to, then that's usually a good idea. And they have an agreement now called New Media, which we went under, because if you're not planning on doing a theatrical component right off the bat, then you can go in under New Media, which makes it a lot easier as far as paperwork and logistics and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've done new media contracts several times before for projects that we've done that were very similar. Like usually we've never done a feature film length, but we've done like short films and also some more even like late night episode adventures and stuff like that.
For sure. Yeah. So
talk a little bit about Seed and Spark and raising that money, because that is I think a lot of people end up doing that route with their first films, especially short films and all that. And it's not as straightforward as you would think.
No, it's not. And I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I always try to tell other filmmakers, and people had told me this before I ever did a crowdfunding, and I still did it knowing this, and it's not to deter anybody, but the amount of work and effort that goes into crowdfunding is really massive. And even for someone like myself, where, I'd spent quite a few years prior to this film writing on my blog and building up an email list, and having this sort of small little community that I've built that has been really supportive of my work, and I'm super grateful for. And I'd assumed, okay, that maybe is going to give me a little bit of a head start when it comes time to crowdfunding, because at least I know I already have some people who are interested in what I'm doing. Maybe they could help spread the word. It definitely did help, but it was still a huge struggle, even just to raise the $15,000 or whatever it was that we were aiming for. Because it's just a different ecosystem. If you're on, right, whether it's Seed and Spark or Kickstarter or whatever, you're kind of starting from scratch. It's almost like opening up a new social media profile or something, and you don't have any followers yet. You're kind of just starting to learn the lay of the land, and you have to do all that so quickly because your campaign may only run for 30 or 45 days. The other huge thing is it's going to take, a month to 2 months to probably set up all of your assets and gather all the stuff you need for the campaign. Then eventually you're going to have to deliver all the perks. So if people order, a DVD or whatever, to deliver all that. So, I wrote, I think, a newsletter on this recently, but if you actually break it down, it might take you 5, 6, 7 months months of work to raise the $10,000 or $20,000 you're trying to raise. So not to say you shouldn't do it, but depending on your financial situation, your working situation, you might just be able to save that money in that amount of time, or, you know, take on a side gig or whatever. So I definitely wouldn't recommend it for everybody, because it's not as simple as it probably appears to be, but it's certainly a great option to explore, and there are a lot of benefits too.
Right. Oh, absolutely. We've never done a crowdfunding, but the things I do know of people that have done it, it is a shitload of legwork. Like, it is a lot of hustle. So do you remember what your average donor was? I'm just curious, like, because you're pretty small chunks, right? They're coming in super small amounts of money.
Yes, they were all, I don't know if I ever calculated the exact average. It probably would have been thrown off because we had one individual, Ryan McCarville, who came in as an executive producer. So he actually bought the $5,000 EP perk. So that, would tip the scales a little bit. But that aside, the other, I'd say probably $100 was average. A lot of people were putting in $25 or $50. Then you get a few people putting in $200 or $250. So I'd say the average person probably, if I had to guess, would probably come in around $100. So that's a good way to sort of work backwards from there. If that's your number, or if you want to be conservative and you say, even, let's say you're assuming you're getting $50 per person, you're raising $10,000 or whatever, it's pretty easy to kind of do the math and see, all right, how many people do I need to actually see this campaign? If my conversion rate is like 2%, how many people, you can sort of do the math and figure out how much traffic you need in order to get the amount of money that you're trying to raise. So,
yeah, and those platforms usually, they take a percentage as well. So you have to go kind of shoot a little above it if you're trying to get exactly that, and you need that actual cash.
Exactly. One of the good things that Seed and Spark does when your donors are paying for, or your supporters or whatever, the contributors, I think they call them on the site, when they're making a contribution, they get the option upon checkout to pay for the fee that you would be paying. And most people, I think, actually did that, or at least like half or something like that on ours. Again, it's going back a couple of years now, so I don't have all the numbers. But I was pretty surprised at how many people just covered that, because they're already sort of feeling generous. They want to support the project, and, to throw in the extra few bucks. I guess it's something that a lot of people want to do, which is great that Seed and Spark allows them to do so.
Yeah, that's a super cool feature. I didn't know they did that, but that's great. Talking about your overall format and how you decided to shoot it, because you went for kind of normally people, when they're going for feature films, are trying to either push to get anamorphic or going, and you kind of almost went the other way. You went 4:3.
Yeah. And it's so funny because, like, when we did it, I thought nobody's really doing 4:3. I think there was one movie that year, and now I can't even remember what it was. I know mid-90s was 4:3. That would have been maybe after we shot. I can't remember the timeline now, but there were like one or two movies that had done it, and I thought it was really cool. And that wasn't really why I wanted to do it. Was more so because I'd been watching all these really old films sort of as references, like these old Ingmar Bergman films, and Persona was a big reference for the movie. And I just sort of, I've always loved that 4:3 framing. I always thought it's such a great way to frame someone's face, and for a micro budget film where it's so contained, it actually even just helps you on a practical level, because you're not quite as wide. So if you're shooting in tighter spaces, you can probably get away with some more stuff there. But it's funny now, because I guess everyone sort of had the same idea. Now there are so many movies coming out that are 4:3, and like TV shows, and everyone's sort of breaking the aspect ratio, it seems, this year. So yeah, it was kind of, I think for me, when we did it, the biggest incentive, other than just some of the practical things that it maybe helped us with, was it put us in this very creative mindset, because all of us on set, whether it was myself, the DP, Mateo, or any of the rest of the team, the camera team, who, we're all used to shooting 2, 3, 5 for everything. But by essentially forcing the team to work in this weird like canvas. It almost was liberating from the beginning creatively, because we all just said, okay, now this is just, this is an art film. Like, we've baked that into the way that we're shooting the film. So we can feel free to experiment. We can feel free to sort of like try stuff. Some of it might work, some of it might not, but it just, I don't know, how to quite describe it other than it just set the tone for us, being willing to like take weird chances and risks and see where it went. And I think in the end, that choice really tied together a lot of the other visuals that we were attempting in I think a nice way, and made it feel more congruent maybe visually.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I read, No Film School did an article on you guys in the film, and it mentioned in there that you got a Duplass Brothers grant. How did that go, and what was it like pitching? Yeah, through Seed and Sparks. How was that pitching? Like, how did that work pitching for that?
Yeah, so basically, I'm trying to remember exactly the steps. So what happened was, originally we were just going to run our standard Seed and Spark campaign, and then they were doing something at the time that I think they still do, which is called a crowdfunding rally. And they'll basically do a competition with all of the different films that are raising money that month. And, they award people different prizes based on their performance. So it just so happened that when we were doing our campaign, we were up for this Hometown Heroes rally. It was right in that time. And we said, okay, we'll take part in it. Why not? It doesn't, even if we don't get anything from it, we have nothing to lose, but potentially there's an upside if we win some of the perks. So
of course, yeah.
Basically, we go through the process, and I think in order to even pitch to the Duplass brothers, you have to get like 1,000 followers on Seed and Spark. So that's sort of the first hurdle. So that's what we did. I remember even running like Facebook ads and stuff like that to get some extra followers, and it worked. So we got followers that qualified us, and then you create a pitch video. Which our pitch was, I originally was thinking of maybe shooting this on film if we could get the full grant. They were doing up to $50,000 grant. So I said, if we get 50,000, like I have an SR2, like I've shot 16 before, I can get the film stock and process it. So we shot this pitch video on 8mm film and cut it together and sent it in through Seed and Spark. And then that got us through, I guess, the next level. And then they asked to read the script. So then I sent them the script, which was pretty close to our final version. And then I guess they read that, and then we were qualified. So they gave 5 people a grant, just a smaller grant, which is the one we got. And they gave one, which was, I can't remember the name of the film now, but it looked like a really cool film that they awarded a larger grant to. And I honestly felt lucky we got anything, because the whole thing with, they call it the Hometown Heroes Rally, because it was all about like getting people in their hometowns, and presumably like smaller towns, smaller markets, to make films within their own communities. And they really wanted to support those people. And I'm based in LA, where, I don't know if that fully fits with that mandate. It's kind of the exact opposite, but I don't know. I guess the project maybe struck a chord, and we got lucky and got a few bucks. So that was a really nice sort of launching off point for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being able to have, just put them on their name on it in any way or another helps for sure. Like, and that's a very cool thing.
It's nice. I mean, I've watched so many of their films, and a lot of them, just in terms of the way they've made the films, Blue Jay in particular. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but really loved that movie and how it was made, and was very improvised. And I think it was all done with a scriptment. And, so it was cool. It was definitely sort of, it wasn't really about the money at all, because, it was a small amount. It was just more, it was nice for our team to sort of know, like, they've seen the project, we sent them the script, we sent them all this other stuff. And, for whatever reason, they seem to want to support the project. So we were happy with that for sure.
So what really sticks out to me about everything you've spoken about and everything you put out about the project is the time frame, because I think the time frame is rather extreme. I wouldn't say, like, hope that doesn't sound like in a negative way. I'm just really impressed, like how you guys did this. So talk to me a little bit about your production schedule and your post schedule.
Yeah. Well, the time frame it's funny because it was more extreme on the production end than post, because production, we shot everything in 9 days. We didn't do any pickups or reshoots or anything like that. And then the post took a long time. I did do a really fast edit initially, but then it essentially took us close to 1.5 years to actually finish the entire movie, just because of a variety of factors that we could get into. But yeah, production, I did this other micro budget feature a couple of years ago called Shadows on the Road, and we shot in a very different way. It was, I wouldn't say improvised, but we were kind of figuring it out as we went. We had a rough schedule, but the night, I remember, there were nights where I would come home at 3 a.m. I remember once, or something like that, from shooting really late, and everybody's so tired, and we have to go shoot the next scene the next morning, and we literally didn't have a location because it was all like guerrilla style, and there were 3 of us or 4 of us a lot of the days, so it was just total chaos. And in the end, that shoot ended up being, I think, 15 days with all the pickups that we did. But what I realized is most of those days, if they were just planned better, I could have shot everything that I actually captured for that movie probably in like 5 or 6 days, which sounds crazy, but sometimes we just didn't shoot enough material, or we weren't being as efficient as we could have been on set. So this time around, I thought, I have 2 options. I can either do the improv sort of route again and try to see what we get, or I can almost treat it more like a larger production, but just scale it down. And I hadn't really done that before. I've had a lot of larger commercial productions that I've produced or directed, but on a feature level, anything that I'd ever worked on narrative, it was always very kind of, we were flying by the seat of our pants. So anyway, we ended up doing, so we did 9 days. And the way that I think the number one thing that helped us in terms of actually getting to the finish line was just the prep work. So we did a ton of, a lot of discussions with Mateo, our DP, just all about the lighting and the framing. And, we did pre-lighting days, we did rehearsals, we did wardrobe, all the usual stuff that you would do on a proper film, we did on this tiny little movie. And the script was, under 90 pages. So that meant we were shooting 10 pages a day. We never had any company move. So we were in just 1 of 2 locations. So, for me, I felt like shooting 10 pages a day was manageable, so long as we put in enough prep beforehand. And in the end, there were a couple of things I wish that we got that we didn't, but those were kind of the exception. I feel like for the most part, we actually were able to capture almost everything that we set out for, even within that time frame, which was great.
Yeah, and it's primarily based, the whole film's based in 2 locations.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. So there are 2 houses, and it's we were either shooting in house 1 or house 2. There's like 3 or 4 exteriors in the whole movie that we sort of stole, just guerrilla stuff on, driving around or whatever, but everything else is just in the houses.
Totally. So were you able to leverage like relationships from your commercial work and your other work outside of that to help you pull this off in such a short way and on such a budget?
You know what, the biggest thing that helped me from the commercial side, honestly, was just the financial aspect of it, because, I recently had bought an Alexa 4x3 Plus, which is, I bought it from the CPO. It's like a certified pre-owned program. And I bought that through my production company. I had a lot of recent commercial productions that I'd been able to, save a little bit of money from. So I think the biggest help from the commercial side was that I was able to sort of like put some money into the project, buy some gear beforehand that we could use on the project. And then, there were a couple of crew members, like our makeup artist, Haley Bringle, who's awesome. She does like all the corporate and commercial stuff that I do. So, on those projects, obviously we're paying her a much better rate. So I was able to call in a favor on this one. Same with our sound recordist, Scott Vanderbilt, who cut me a great deal. So there were definitely those cases, but for the most part, I'd say most of our team I hadn't actually worked with before. So it was a bit of a gamble going into it, but I got really lucky that everyone kind of really like brought their A game and just knocked it out of the park, even though I hadn't had, so much experience with all of them before.
Totally. So you shot on the Alexa, and what lenses did you use, and what was your primary lighting like?
Yeah, so the lenses were the Angenieux Optimo zooms. So I can't remember the exact zoom range, but I think one is something like 18 to 40, and the other is 40 to 80 or 50 to 80 or something like that.
The DP Optimos or whatever, or the EZs.
The DP one, they're from the early 2000s, I think.
Gotcha.
Like
yeah. No, I know the ones you're talking about. Yeah. I think it's like 16 to 42 or 15 to 40 or something, and 40 to 70 or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, that combo. So we just shot the whole movie on those two lenses. And the reason we went zooms was that was sort of baked into the idea right from the get-go, because there were going to be a lot of optical zooms in camera. I wanted, the main character, Alice, has this condition with her heart. She wasn't able really to like move without having trouble breathing, prior. This is all in the backstory of the movie. So my idea originally, just creatively, was that we should try to find a way to sort of tie the camera movement or lack of movement to like her character. And I don't know if people would see that or not, or feel that or not, but it was just a good rule for us to work from. So it kind of, right off the bat, we could say, okay, we don't need a steady cam. We don't need a dolly, let's just almost pretend that this camera can't move, and then work within that limitation to see what sort of creativity that it will spark. And, one of the things that came out of that was the use of zoom lenses. So the only two things I really said, or I guess the three things I probably said to Matteo early on, our DP, about the process was, I said, I want it to be 4x3. I really want to go for like very soft, sort of moody lighting, looking vintage, like more 60s, 70s kind of feel. And then what was the third thing? Framing, lighting. Oh yeah. And then the zoom. So we wanted to push in on this character to kind of, again, use that 4x3 frame to really like get in as tight as we could on the faces, and just do some fun stuff in camera, because if you're on the sticks the whole time, it can get a little bit dry, and feel like, you can start craving a little bit more visual momentum. So those were kind of the three rules that we had. And then as far as lighting went, I think Matteo primarily used light mats. So I'm sure a lot of people listening are super familiar with those. They're great LED panels, super versatile and light, easy to use. So those, we had a China ball, we had a 2K, we had, some little quasar tubes, and that was basically it. We used a lot of practicals, just lamps and things like that in the shots. And most of the scenes were probably lit with, 2 lights or maybe 3 lights at the most.
Yeah, I love shooting that way with a lot of practicals, very open, and it allows you to move really quickly, like, and change and turn over, which is really what's key.
100%. Yeah. And for us, it was also a logistical thing, because the houses we were shooting were so small that, and we had, like you said, we had to turn around so quickly. So there was almost nowhere to even put gear. So that's why like light mats and things like that were so helpful, because they were just where they were, and then we could just walk them over to the next room, and we weren't having to, unpack an entire room that was stacked with cases and lights and, stands and everything. So that helped us for sure logistically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where it helps being somewhere outside of New York, because we've done those shoots in New York, like on Narrative Ones, and you're literally behind the camera is all the people and stacks of cases. And then you're like, all right, guys, now we got to look this way. And everybody sighs, wipes sweat off their forehead, and then starts moving shit to the hallway.
Oh my God. Yeah. New York, I can only imagine just the size of, some of the rooms that I've like stayed in or I've seen there to think about doing a production. It's crazy. But again, that's where those light mats or even those quasars come in. Those things were so helpful. We would like stick them all over the place, and they just act as an eye light or a little, splash some light on the background somewhere where we weren't getting any exposure. And they're tiny. They're like, 8-inch or 12-inch,
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, those were kind of my highlight, because I hadn't used those much before this shoot.
So what do you think your overall takeaways are and the lessons you learned from making the film?
I think the lessons that I learned, there's sort of, I guess, a couple ways I can answer that. There's like the more universal stuff, and then maybe what applies to me personally, but I'll go universal first. So I think what I learned is that, it really reinforced the importance of planning and prep, because what I was able to capture, I think, in 9 days versus 15 days on the last feature, I felt like I had way more material, better material. Not to say anything is perfect. There's certainly things I could do differently or improve on if I were to go back now in hindsight. But I really genuinely felt like we really did maximize all the time that we had on set. And I think that was reinforced by, just kind of looking back at the footage, I guess, and seeing, there weren't that many hours in an average day when we weren't, or even minutes in an average day when we weren't shooting. So I think that was huge. I think, one thing I learned just on, I think, probably a script level, when you're working with a film that's this short, our final runtime is 71, 72 minutes. And our first cut was probably 90 or 85 or whatever. Most films wind up at 90 minutes, but the first cut is probably, I don't know, 2 hours.
Yeah,
exactly. There's just so much material. So the biggest challenge when you're shooting in 9 days is there's so little room for error. It's almost like you're shooting, to use an analogy, on reversal film, where like you have to nail the exposure. It's like you have to nail everything you're doing in 9 days, because if you do everything right, then, you're still going to have to cut scenes in the edit. Everyone always does, or you're still going to have to trim things, and just with pacing and whatever, you're probably going to lose, let's say 10% at least of your film in the edit, maybe 20%. So knowing that, I think going into a future film, if I were to do if I were to do this film again tomorrow, I might add 2 days. It sounds like nothing, but just give yourself that little buffer, give yourself 10% or 20% more than you think you'll need, because you are almost guaranteed to lose that. And the material, you could be so solid on it on the page. You could be reading it and you're like, yeah, this is great. This scene's 100% working. Some of the scenes I was most set on in the script literally aren't even in the movie anymore. So when I look back on it, and I think in total, there was probably, a day and a half of material that we shot over the course of the 9 days that just didn't make it in the film. So imagine what we could have done if we had that day and a half back, or if we were shooting something else in that time. So, it's all about just making sure the script is as bulletproof as possible before you go into the shoot. I think we did a good job with it, and we got it really far, but again, there's always that extra 10% you can take it. And then, I think then when you're on set, just making sure that you don't waste any time. Although we were shooting, like I said, most of the days, all day, I didn't feel like we had a lot of downtime. We were wasting time just sitting around. There were still some scenes where, in the first or second take, we had it and we shot 6 or 7 just because we were there and because it's digital and we could keep rolling. And that's one of the reasons I love film so much, is because if you get it on the first take, then you just move on, and, it's actually a lot more efficient. So, I don't know, it's sort of throwing a lot at you, but I think just that overall efficiency is always something that I want to, try to take away and improve upon, because on these little micro budget productions, efficiency is kind of all you have. It makes or breaks it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think the efficiencies, you're exactly right with film versus digital. I mean, I can't tell you how many times you just toss in an extra couple takes just because you're there, you're set up, instead of being like, we got it, move to the next thing. Is there any other thoughts that you have about people making micro budgets specifically, things that you've encountered while doing these that is this is going to save your ass?
you can tell a lot of stories, like even action films or thrillers that do have a lot of different set pieces and locations. That's still totally possible on a micro budget. And know that you can go both ways. Like you can do a 9-day feature like I did, or you could do a 30-day feature with 2 or 3 friends and not spend a lot of money, but know that up front and then bake that into the script.
Definitely. I mean, and you cover, so much of this is covered within, you go pretty in depth on your website, and your podcast they're also very good. So if people want to come learn more about you, your process and your company, and check out all the materials you already have, where should they go?
So yeah, the hub of everything is just my blog, noamkroll.com. So you guys can look that up. It's just my name, Noam, NOAMKROLL.com. And then on that site, it'll link to my social media stuff, which you guys can follow, but also my podcast, Show Don't Tell, which I'm releasing 1 to 2 episodes a week unless I get super busy and I don't do any. And then really my newsletter is the one thing that I'm really trying to push everybody hopefully to sign up for, because I put more time now into this newsletter I send on Sunday. I don't really publish it anywhere else. Just on there once in a while, maybe I'll repost on my blog. But I send original articles and content all about micro budget filmmaking exclusively to this newsletter. And sometimes, like I just gave away $2,700 camera package and B&H gift card and all this stuff. So I'll do giveaways and stuff like that on there too. So if anyone wants to sign up, just go noamkroll.com/newsletter. And then, yeah, everything else is kind of connected to those channels.
Absolutely. And Psychosynthesis, your film, they can find on Amazon Prime.
Feel free to check it out and let me know what you think. And if anyone has questions, I also have just a general email if people have filmmaking questions or whatever about their projects, just info@noamkroll.com. So that's one more place you guys can find me.
Filmmaking is a collaborative experience, as is this podcast. So be sure to follow us on Instagram for all upcoming episode announcements at framework_productions. There you can leave your questions and comments for our guests and for any topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Of course, subscribe to Independent Filmmakers Guide wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a rating and let us know how you like the show with a review. It really is helpful. And if you'd like to read the credits for an episode, give us a call. 347-871-1559 and leave us your email.
Hi, I'm Brian Deek, an editor and cinematographer from New Jersey, and I'm reading the credits. IFG is created by Framework Productions and directed by James Allerdyce. It's produced by Matt Mundy, edited by Audrey Rae McHale, and hosted by Stephen Pierce. The music is by Glossboy. Find his music on freemusicarchive.org. See and listen to all the episodes, plus bonus content at independentfilmmakersguide.com. Thanks for listening.
Hey friends, we just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about 2 personal things. First, we wanted to thank you, our listening community, and our wonderful guests, learning so much together along the way and continuing to learn, sharing our stories, making a lot of new friends, and collaborating, which is exactly what this is all about. Which also brings me to my second point. In great part to many of these new relationships, we wanted to let you know that we've taken a lot of this advice ourselves and made our own narrative feature film, Herd, H-E-R-D, Herd, which is premiering this October on Friday the 13th in select theaters as well as on VOD. Personally, I think it's the perfect kind of scary movie to watch during our favorite scary season. So we'd love for you to celebrate with us and watch Herd. You can pre-order it on Apple TV, and of course, do the communal thing, see it in theaters. Of course, for all of this, please see our show notes, but basically, we're going to keep it all updated at herd.film. That's HERD.FILM, herd.film as well. Thank you again, and be sure to give us a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts so we can continue to build this community and collaborate. IFG, how movies get made.